Senator Lankford, you are recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kane, you've spent a lot of time studying authoritarian regimes and how they use social media to be able to literally control their own populations. Chinese government obviously doing this with the Uyghurs and what they have done. In that case, you've spent a lot of time studying and going through. One of those features that's in TikTok, for instance, and in several platforms, is the permissions that's actually done there. When you join it, you use this free platform. The user gives ByteDance, TikTok, whoever it may be, the opportunity to be able to open their microphone, to use facial recognition, to be able to store data on that. How is that information used in an authoritarian regime?
An authoritarian regime such as China will attempt to get access to that data and use it to build artificial intelligence capabilities that might involve espionage, spying on military officials, government officials. This is a major Trojan horse that needs to be dealt with, and the Chinese government has made clear in its national artificial intelligence strategies that it does need data, that data is its biggest target.
Right. One of the things that I've seen from TikTok even recently is the ability to be able to keep up with keystrokes. If you use their app to be able to then go to other websites so they can then track your keystrokes, that would include credit card numbers, that would include passwords, user IDs, all of those things as well. Factual or not factual?
Factual. You are absolutely correct, Senator.
So they have made the statement publicly, well, we don't use that for any other purposes, we just maintain that. That is now owned by the Chinese government. At that point, if it's going through TikTok, they have access through that to be able to get usernames, passwords, facial recognition, everything else on this. So that's the building of a database system. This is not some hypothetical possible thing. This is actually occurring.
Precisely, Senator. This is occurring. This is the data so TikTok does gather large numbers of data, and there was one recent study by Citizen Lab, which does work on this, which found that TikTok does gather unusually large amounts of data from its users. There was the key logging software that was found recently and reported on. TikTok has said that they don't use this, but it's there, and if the Chinese Communist Party wants to get access to it, they have the power to do it.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Red, I want to ask you a little bit about a value system. You have a unique perspective from coming from Twitter and then outside of it to be able to look backwards on this. It's unusual to me that Twitter is blocked in many authoritarian countries, but yet the leaders of those countries are allowed to be on Twitter and to be able to put out authoritarian propaganda, basically. They're still allowed to be able to do that. Twitter's value system seems to shift from country to country based on that country. Even if that country blocks them from a platform, they're still allowed to be able to put out the propaganda from that platform. Tell me, am I wrong on this? What have you seen?
So Twitter certainly is obligated to follow the laws of all the countries that it's operated.
Sure.
I think that's a consequence of what you're seeing.
But it also seems to be a patchwork of values in these countries, where in our country they'll say, we really stand strong for this principle, but in another country they don't.
I think that's a fair characterization.
So is that a problem long term, or giving authoritarian regimes a platform through that is just a matter of having customers there, even if those countries actually even block the use of Twitter in their country?
So I think the bigger problem is the consequences of their overwhelming incentive model. So that is probably not having that deeply specific about that example of per country variation, that is a consequence of trying to get everyone to use the platform and then being subject to some constraints, whether it's local governments or some other constraints. I think the broader problem is the consequences of who sees what content and what that does to people in the real world as a function of the incentive structure that is created for these companies.
Recent testimony on Twitter has come out that they have had on their team Chinese spies, individuals that work for the Indian government, individuals that work for the Saudi government that were on the staff and were funneling information back to those authoritarian regimes from the staff. I would assume Twitter has a process of actually going through and vetting their employees. I'm making an assumption that while you were there, you saw some of the vetting of how this actually happens. How are they vetting their employees, or to be able to evaluate individuals so they don't end up with Chinese spies, Saudi employees from the Saudi government, or required from the Indian government, for instance?
So it may have changed in the time that I was there. Certainly nothing, there is background checks and other things you go through and you get hired, but there's nothing I saw that made me think that process was designed to counteract a threat model of governments inserting spies. It was much more pedestrian of a process than that.
would Twitter be, it seems to be a different issue when you talk about the Indian government saying we're requiring our individuals to actually be on your staff, to be able to be in the process, or to allow individuals, as was accused from the Saudi government, to be there on the staff. That doesn't seem to be a vetting issue. That seems to be a requirement. If you're in our country, we also require backdoor access, basically.
I'm not sure I'm familiar with the specific rules from India and Saudi Arabia in terms of operating the country.
Fair enough. But this is an issue. We'll have an opportunity in the second panel to be able to talk about this. Mr. Boland, you've spoken out often on the algorithms that are out there and dealing with basically how the platforms seem to engage angry comments. The angrier that you become, the more it helps the algorithm to be able to engage and to be able to place this. I have done a recommendation to Facebook for years to say, why couldn't the page owner, in that sense, be able to take the comments? If people want to make comments, those comments come to the page itself, that individual, but other individuals can't see it. So there's basically an option that you could create to say, I turn off the public viewing of all the comments. If you want to make comments to me and we want to have dialogue, you can do that, but it prevents people that make comments on my page from attacking other people that make comments on the page. Basically, what Facebook has created is a place for people to scream at each other in a lot of the political dialogue, and it's pretty hostile, and then it reinforces the anger comments to continue to be able to drive that. What I'm describing to you of giving the user, the owner of a page, the option to be able to make the comments between myself and those that are making comments so they can't attack each other, is that technically possible to be able to do?
Yeah, that's technically possible to be able to do. I think an important step for a lot of the product development work is back to this transparency point of if we could have researchers and academics involved in evaluating the different types of scenarios here and the trade-offs. I think that could move us a lot faster forward.
Yeah, the value system of Facebook seems to be that we want that engagement across and that anger and that attack to each other because that keeps people engaged. So instead of trying to lower the temperature and saying on this page the temperature is going to be lower, it seems to be high temperature as many places as possible. And the anger portion of it, and the anger emoji or anger responses seem to build in that algorithm to continue to accelerate coming back to that page over and over again.
Yeah, I think an important point that Alex has made is that the algorithm knows no temperature. It doesn't know if something's charged or not charged. It just knows whether it gets a result. It knows if it gets engagement. And so without there being a qualitative view over the kinds of content, the algorithms will just chase what they're told to chase. And they're really, really good at it. They're really, really good at going after the metrics that they're given. And as machine learning techniques improve, you'll see more and more of that. So, the idea that it chases that kind of content, if that's what gets engagement and that's what gets reaction, that's what's going to grow in the system.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lankford.